Hey, what's up, you guys? My name is Mitko Karshovski, and welcome to episode 101 of That Remote Life podcast, where we hear from location-independent entrepreneurs and professionals so you can learn to quit the cubicle and live life on your terms. I am very excited because my guest today is none other than Sarah Sandnes, the co-founder and CTO of Safety Wing. Safety Wing is one of the only health insurance providers specifically for digital nomads and remote workers. Insurance, however, is not the only thing that Safety Wing does. Their end goal is to continue creating more services for nomads in order to create a larger social safety net for global citizens. This includes things like maternity leave, pensions, and much more. Their latest initiative is Plumia, which is the first digital country with which they hope to create the first globally recognized passport not based on a country with borders. During this interview, I got to ask Sarah about her background and how she got involved with tech and what eventually drove her to start Safety Wing with her co-founders. We discuss how COVID-19 affected their business and how they responded to the pandemic. And finally, we of course discuss Plumia and what their plan is for creating a new country and why they're so passionate to do so in the first place. Now, before we dive into this episode, I do want to take a second and let you know about my new community, Six Figure Nomad, which is now open. You can learn more about the community and join by going to thatremotelifecom/6figures. That's six figures all spelled out. I started Six Figure Nomad because I believe that more knowledge is not what's keeping you from building a successful business. Like Derek Sivers, the founder of CD Baby, once said, if more knowledge is what you needed, we would all be billionaires with six-pack abs. Instead, I believe that what you need to learn is how to actually put that knowledge to work. That's why Six Figure Nomad is based on case studies of real online businesses just like the one you want to build. World-renowned business schools like Harvard use case studies just like these to give their students an under-the-hood look of how real businesses operate and how their founders grew them. These case studies also present students with the problems these businesses are currently facing so that they get the chance to practice their problem-solving skills, which all entrepreneurs need in their journey. As a member of Six Figure Nomad, you will have the chance to review case studies of location-independent businesses that are generating $100,000 or more. You'll get to learn how the founder started their business, how they grew their revenue, and what the critical turning points in their business were. You will also learn what their biggest challenges at the moment and get the opportunity to discuss possible solutions to those challenges with other members of Six Figure Nomad on our regular live calls. So if you are ready to put your skills and knowledge to work and finally build the lifestyle business of your dreams, then head on over to thatremotelifecom/6figures. That's six figures all spelled out, and sign up. Currently, we are running an amazing early adopter special that ends at midnight on January 31st, at which point the price is going to go up drastically. So don't sleep on this. Head on over to thatremotelifecom/6figures and sign up today. All right, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. You can find all the show notes and resources we mentioned during the interview at thatremotelifecom/episode 101. That's episode all spelled out, followed by the number 101. All right, without further ado, let's dive into this conversation with Sarah Sandnes from SafetyWing.com. All right, Sarah, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm over here. I'm a little bit jealous, I got to be honest. You said you're in LA and I'm over here freezing my butt off in Cincinnati, Ohio. So I'm a little bit jealous, but you must not be like too bothered by the cold because I know that you were born and grew up in Norway. So are you in the cold friends or did you move to LA to escape the cold?
I moved to LA from New York, and weather is definitely a part of the reason. That being said, yeah, Norway's cold, but New York has the absolute worst winters I've ever experienced.
Really?
Yeah.
Worse
It's
than
just,
Norway?
yeah, I mean, Norway's a little bit colder, but Norway's not as moody, and we just kind of, we handle it really well. It's like we have a whole culture surrounding it. I mean, we have winter for like 5 months every year. So,
What do you mean you have a,
cafes.
what is like the culture? Like what is, I'm curious because I hate winter. So any way you can help me with this culture, I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, it's cozy, and big culture for skiing, going on trips up to, cabins in the mountains, and, drinking cocoa, fireplace, dress well. We have a Norwegian expression that's like, there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing, except in Norwegian.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, it rhymes in Norwegian. Finnes ikke dårlige klær, bare dårlig vær. um, Dårlig vær, but yeah, I said it the opposite way.
We won't judge you. If you hadn't
Yeah.
told us, we wouldn't have known.
Yeah, exactly. But the Norwegians that hear it will know this. But anyway, yeah. So I mean, we are not afraid to really put on a lot of clothes when we leave the house. Another thing is just like plowing and roads, and putting salt and gravel and on the road so that it's not slippery everywhere is another thing. Just like immediately, within the hour, it's happening in Norway. If it starts snowing, it's just like we got it. Subways don't stop running, schools don't shut down.
Right, because you know what's up. Yeah, it's like when there's like the joke that in northern cities in the US you never get snow days as a kid because it's like this is what you signed up for.
Yeah.
No snow days. You just figure it out. Wow, there's a tiny little bit of snow that falls on the ground in Georgia and like the whole state shuts down. So I totally understand. But yeah, so how did you grew up in Norway, and at what point did you, because the reason why we're having you on is you're the CTO and co-founder of SafetyWing. So I'm super excited to talk to you about that. Like I said before we started recording, you guys have done a lot of amazing stuff for the remote community, for the digital nomad community. So I'm really excited to touch on that. But before we kind of roll into that, how did you become interested in technology in the first place?
I mean, I think I had a pretty standard way into that, like many other people, which is like just computers and video games and just being obsessed with them when I was a kid. And just like it's going into studying computer science from being, like a video game nerd is a pretty natural path, and computers. So yeah, I got my first Nintendo for my 6th birthday, I think. And, and then it was just like a nonstop gamer. And then we got our first computer when I was 12 or 13. And then I was just like on the computer, either playing games or surfing the internet or, torrenting, or that's not even what we called it back then. It was like, Napster or LimeWire or whatever we were doing, and I started drawing manga characters. Yes, I was very nerdy in Microsoft Paint of all things. And then the first thing I did, like technology wise, was that I built my website to be able to share those manga drawings.
How did you build it at the time? Because now it's easy, right? You go to Squarespace or whatever. How did you build it at the time?
Yeah, no, then I was coding in Notepad, literally writing code in Notepad. It was not a pretty site, but it was scrollable, and I was 13 at the time, and that was my first like endeavor with technology, and became more advanced from that, of course. I remember, like I was always ambitious, if I can say that. It's kind of cheesy, but like always imagine myself having like a career, and like and I knew I wanted to go to university. And I imagined myself studying finance. I also knew that I wanted to have my own company. And I just thought that like economics or finance is what you study if you want to have a serious career. And then, so I had like all my nerd interests, but that's what I imagined I would do as like a career. And then at some point I was like, wait, computer science is like, is that something you don't study just for fun? So it was a very obvious choice when I realized that was like a legit career path. And some people love it and some people don't. I studied math, and really fell in love with coding and programming immediately. It's a very, very creative process. It's like you get to be in the zone for a long time. I'm that kind of person that I enjoy that, getting sucked into something and being stuck in there, or just being in that zone for hours. And coding is like, I've never encountered anything quite as that has a strong suction
that
as
like
coding.
Sucks you in that way.
Producing music's a little bit the same way.
Do you do any of that?
Yes, I'm not good. I never got to like, coding. They say that it take like 10,000 hours to become an expert at something. And
Hmm.
I'm like way beyond that on coding. On music production, I'm probably like, I don't know, maybe 50 hours in. So,
Yeah,
like novice.
I thought for a little while there that I wanted to also get into web development because I don't so I didn't have the same childhood where I was a gamer, but I never really like crossed. I think people that are gamers are just about to like spit at me if I said that I'm a gamer, but like I never really crossed that threshold of like I enjoy playing video games that let me figure out what makes them tick. Like I was like, no, I'm just gonna play these video games and
Yeah,
enjoy
yeah.
them. But I did at one point want to learn to be a web developer and I started training at an agency and I'm totally with you. Even though I'm not somebody who should be coding, it's not how like my mind works. It totally does suck you in. There's these moments
Mhm.
where I think it's like the right amount of like it's not so hard that you need to like bang your head against the wall, but it's this like it's challenging, but it's fun because you can figure it out. Like when that overlap of like challenging but easy like crosses over, you get into that flow with coding and like you're
Mhm.
off. Like 5 hours later, you wake up, you know.
Yeah, yeah. No, exactly.
So
It's just like time just flies.
you said that you're a gamer. So I'm curious to hear your opinion on this. And then we got plenty of time to talk about the safety wing stuff. But how do you feel about what's been happening in esports? Because I have gotten really like I've watched maybe a few things online in terms of esports, but I love the idea. Like it's like the sports for digital nomads in a way, right? Like our whole life revolves digitally, so our sports might as well be digital as well. How do you feel about everything that's happening in esports?
I like full disclaimer, I never played racing games. I never played sports games. I mean,
Mhm.
other than as socially. So that's not really. I'm like a super like campaign person. That's how I game. I always have
Mm.
game, not even online playing.
So you
Um,
never played like any of those like Dota or any of those other games that
tiny bit of
everyone's
Star,
playing?
tiny bit of StarCraft is what I played, but
Mm.
never competitively. Like it was mainly campaign, and then I tried it out, and then yeah. I love playing campaigns. And then when I'm done with the campaign, if it was a great game, then I feel very empty and sad for a few days. Uh, and, yeah, and then I wait until there's another video game that I love. Also, I used the game a lot more when I was younger um, than I do now. Like up until when I went through university, I was still gaming a lot. But then when I started working, I became now I'll be gaming occasionally.
Sure. So how did you go from, obviously you said you were studying in university and you were studying coding and, you already had a little bit of an idea that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, like you said. So walk me through how did you end up starting Safety Wing? Like how did those things click together?
Yeah. So yeah, the my original idea of to just give the whole story. My original idea of starting my own company, I think started I was probably like 10, 13, some I mean early like very young. But that was more just like my own realization of my personality just doesn't I'm like not good with authorities and want to like to do things my own way. And I just realized that starting a company or at least working independently is going to be better for me. Even though I mean I've had lots of jobs, so it's I mean I'm not incapable, but like I thrive when I get to work more independently. And then that's something that I always knew that I want to do. I'm also like a pretty I have very I'm not very risk averse. I'm very I seek risks and
Hmm.
not in extreme sports, but like career choices, moving around, those kinds of things. My fear is not of risks. My fear is of stagnation.
Mm.
People just have different ways, the different things that triggers their fear, and for me, that's stagnation. And um, and then I did the STEM route, kind of studying computer science in university, and then got my first job, which was kind of an extension of university where I was working as a consultant to further learn to code. And then when I felt I was good enough to take on more responsibility, I took a job in London working as a lead engineer for a startup there called TapTac, which was super fun, super challenging, very, very technical role, doing a lot of fun algorithm work and building out the architecture on the back end there. It was awesome. Um, but then eventually it was like, okay, now it's time. I gotta start my own company. I didn't have like a specific thing in mind, so I just left. Had a little bit of savings and became a digital nomad while kind of figuring out this next step, while also working on my music. So that's like another little part of me. But yeah, and during this time, started a couple of projects, and one of them was SafetyWing, and that's the
So
one
you
that just
started it while you were nomading, so to say?
yeah, pretty much. Um, I and then I ended up in New York, where I ended up staying. And yeah, we were working then. Like it started with like 8 hours a week, and then suddenly it was 16 hours a week, and then suddenly it was full time. And then we got into Y Combinator, the startup
Mm.
accelerator, and then it was a lot more than full time. And we've just like, going through Y Combinator is kind of like strapping a jetpack and just like, or you just start running and you never stop. It's like just really speeds things up, and that's been my life ever since. And
So what made you, because you have a technical background, and one of the things that I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole in terms of business is the health, the medical world, because I mean, medical insurance is just a nightmare. So what made you feel like, I know that you said that you weren't very risk averse, that you're pretty comfortable with the risky things, but still, what made you say like, you know what, we can do this, like we can solve this problem?
yeah, um, definitely pretty insane. I never saw myself as someone that would ever end up in the insurance industry. That's not like when I wasn't aiming for the insurance industry when we were starting SafetyWing. It was more solving a really big problem.
Mm.
And yeah, as a digital nomad, I saw this problem. Like, okay, I'm from Norway, but I'm not really attached to Norway anymore. And we were born. I was born and raised there, and we have a great social safety net. Never really like scared of anything. Um, and I actually had cancer back when I was 18 and went through the health system there. And I mean, cancer kind of sucks, but I had a great experience. Like I was so well taken care of. It was never on my mind. But then, imagine being somewhere else or not being connected to a system as good as Norway. Then that's just kind of like where you are, where you're from will depend your outcome will
Hmm.
decide your outcome in that kind of situation. So it's just kind of feeling that, and just thinking like, why isn't it just available globally? Like I'm willing to pay for it. I'm paying for it. Like when I'm in Norway, I'm paying for it. It's just a percentage of my income. And there's no reason why it can't work globally for people that are, globally minded, globally oriented.
Sure.
And yeah, at the same time, my co-founder Sandre was he'd started a company, a freelancer platform, and they also had that, they had tons of freelancers all over the world, and had this thing where they were finding the top freelancers in the world, and wanted to retain them and offer them benefits. And then it's like, wait, there are no global benefits available. This is a nightmare, and it should be there. We're not the only global freelancer platform out there or global company. So yeah, we just then decided to solve that problem of building a global social safety net,
Mm.
which isn't just health insurance. It's also, disability insurance and income protection, like when you get sick, or maternity, those kinds of things. Um, so yeah, we just started out with as kind of like experts at our problem rather than experts on the area we needed to touch upon to find a solution.
And
Um,
sometimes, to come up with good solutions, you need to be like on the outside, right? Like one of the
yeah.
issues is that everybody trying to solve the medical insurance problem has
Mhm.
been in medical insurance for years, and it's really difficult to
Yeah.
come up with new ideas, and you sometimes need to come out. I mean, I think that's been the case for a lot of these like Silicon Valley unicorns, is that like they come out of left field. They're not experts, but they come in and they kind of like look at the problem and solve it from a new perspective.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And we definitely see that it's hard for established people in the insurance industry to think the same way that we do, and especially in terms of like simplifying things and making it easy for users, and removing options. Like I just bought car insurance, and car insurance has not gone through this whole thing, and it's like luckily I know quite a bit about insurance at this point, but it's like,
You got all
you
the
know,
connections, you know
yeah.
everything it is. Yeah.
So it's like I just understand the form where I'm like choosing the different things. But it's like most people just want, a few clicks and just have something that works and that's good. They don't want to spend like hours researching. I'm just like, if I'd never bought insurance before, I didn't know about insurance, it probably would have taken me like a week to buy that car insurance, because I would have had to do so much research.
Mm,
And that's not what people want. Like customers just want something that works. And yeah, we also to mention that we have a third co-founder, Hans, whose background as a lawyer and has worked in the financial industry, so he's used to working with like in a regulated industry, and that is the problem with insurance. Like insurance in itself is kind of like a fun and interesting concept of, it's just like a lot of people sharing risks. They're putting money into a pot, and then there's a list of conditions that can give you that will give you money if it happens,
mm,
or it will pay the bills if the things on that list happens. And that in itself is not that complicated, but then the complicated part is how regulated it is and like how different countries have different laws. And that's kind of the challenge we're working on with SafetyWing, is all the regulations. But it's just like, yeah, one at a time, and working with partners and having partners that have already done that groundwork. And we put our products on top of kind of like the legal backend that they've built up over time, and over time we take over more and more of the legal backend, and that's kind of how you build a
mm.
startup in the insurance industry. And at this point, we're pretty well versed in insurance. I'm even a licensed agent in the States now. It's
Oh, wow. That's
yeah.
impressive. So why should, I know there's several other health insurance providers that offer some type of global insurance.
Mhm.
Why should people, like, what is the kind of thing that makes you guys different? Like, why should somebody listening who's a digital nomad consider you guys, and what do you guys do differently than some of the other like companies out there?
Yeah. Like I mentioned, it's we're focusing on simplifying. So I mean, I would say that there are two things. It's like where we are right now, how we compare, and then there's also like what does everything look like in 2 years, 5 years, and who, like, what kind of journey do you want to be part of as a customer. And yeah, where we are right now is we have two products that are live and one that's coming live over the next couple of months. So right now we have a travel medical insurance and a global health insurance.
What is the
And
difference between those?
yeah, I was just
Okay.
about to get into that, which is with the travel medical insurance, the ideal situation if you have something to fall back on in your home country.
Mm,
If you get something serious like MS or something like that, that's not something you can just like, you can't get that treated over time on your travel insurance policy. Then you will go to the hospital and you will have some symptoms and you will get that initial thing, and then you will be sent home, right? Um, and same goes for cancer, those kinds of things. Um, uh, but with a health insurance, then you're covered as if you had full coverage. So it just depends on your situation. Also, obviously, because of a health insurance needs to cover you for anything long term. Health insurance is more expensive. So that's another other big difference. But both will cover you if something happens. It's just that the
mhm.
health insurance is more for those that don't have anything other to fall back on.
Gotcha. It's more like
Um,
a base, like a full one, as
yeah,
opposed to the travel one is more like what you'll see a lot of other travel companies, travel insurance companies do, where it's like, hey, if you get like really, really banged up in Thailand, you're gonna get shipped back to the US where your normal US health insurance will take over. Is that correct?
yeah, typically. I mean, exactly. Like for if it's like a long, you will get the surgeries you need. Anything acute will happen. But if there's like a year-long rehabilitation program that happens afterwards, that's not something that's typically covered under travel
Gotcha.
medical
And
travel
does the
plan.
travel medical, does that also, because I know for a lot of people like myself, one of the really important things is to have like a total insurance. Because I know there's some other companies out there that do things like, hey, if your laptop gets stolen, for
Mhm.
example, or stuff like that, is that something that's also included, or does it focus just specifically on the medical?
So currently, that's definitely one thing that's coming in this year, Q2 or Q3, is the items insurance. Right now, we only cover items if they're in lost checked luggage. Like we don't
Mm.
cover theft or if you drop it or anything like that. But we are working on having that as an add-on. Yeah, optional add-on. Definitely focus on the medical policy. But we do also have some travel things. Like for example, when COVID happened, like we had thousands of people that were flying home. That was covered.
So you bring up COVID, and one of the things that I want to talk about here was obviously this was something that was unexpected, something that happened and was kind of, you guys are almost in like, if you can think about the worst industries to be in with this, it's like travel and medical. And you guys are
Yeah.
kind of like overlap of those. So I'm sure
Yeah.
that wasn't a fun experience. But one of the things actually have a friend who has Safety Wing. And one of the things that he kind of happened was that he was assuming that he'd be covered under it. And then there were some issues that happened. And I know that's happened with like one or two other people. What exactly happened there? Because I know you guys, there was a situation where you guys couldn't cover people under COVID or during COVID, but then afterwards you launched something with which they could be covered. And
Mhm.
so what happened there? Like, why wasn't this something that was covered under like their regular, the medical insurance?
Yeah, it's very common and typical for travel policies to have exclusions for pandemics.
Mm.
Um, that being said, typically pandemics are not global. Like the Zika virus, for
Right.
example, that would have been something like get out of the area where there's Zika. But this was a very special situation because suddenly it was like get out of every country whatsoever.
Right, right, right.
Yeah. So, and like most other policies, have had a somewhat of a pandemic exclusion. Like ours, in particular, followed the CDC. They have like a list of countries where there's like a warning level attached to it, which is level 1 to 3. And then if it reaches level 3, then you're no longer covered if you go to that country that has a level 3. And you also have 10 days to get out of that country. So if it was Zika and that happened in Thailand, I can't remember exactly where the Zika virus happened, but let's say it was Thailand.
Mhm.
Then you have 10 days to go to Vietnam, or something like that. But now it was you had 10 days to get home. And if when the global warning happened, like it started with China, and then it was China and Italy, and but suddenly it was the whole world like a month later. Um, yeah.
And you guys, because you guys aren't actually providing the insurance, right? You essentially, I don't know the specific terminology for this, but essentially you underwrite, or there's another company that's providing the insurance and you guys sort of package it, correct? So is this something where they told you guys like, hey, we can't cover this? Um, is that how it went?
Yeah, you have the underwriter, that they decide, like they approve the policy and create the policy, and will also determine who's covered or not. And then you have the whole legal structure on top. um, and the legal structure is kind of where you can distribute. They have to follow all the rules of where you can sell it and everything like that. And then you have us. So we create insurance products, and then we go to people, like we go to the setups where other people have already done that groundwork of, like, the legal distributions, and then we get the product made, with the underwriters involved. And then that product is, and then we get the exclusive right to sell that product. So you can't go to anyone else and buy the product that we are selling. You have to buy that through us. So the consequence of doing that is, so we have a smaller margin when we don't take as much of the risk, but the
Mm.
product is still something you can only get through us. And we have all the customer service attached to it, and things like that. And all the tech, and the website and the user experience, all of that is on our place. So there is only one entryway. And it was already in the policy, the pre-agreed upon policy document, right? Um, like it's a travel medical policy, and then we started with a travel medical policy, and then we added in some things that are like more digital nomad specific, like home country coverage, and the subscription feature, or like the auto extension feature, or like made it completely flexible so that you can buy it and like stop it whenever you want, things like that. But and then pandemic exclusion seems reasonable when you're reading it, up until the global pandemic happened. And it might, if it had been a different virus than COVID, it would have made sense to have everyone go home. But it is a special, virus where it's like lethal. But as long as people are quarantining and safe, it's like you don't have to go home and be with your family. You can choose to quarantine somewhere else, and everyone will hopefully survive and get through it if they're careful. We did end up covering it. So it's kind of like, imagine you can't really, start selling tornado insurance in the middle of a storm, right? So it just takes a little while to figure out what are the risks before you can kind of calculate it. So, the price went up with like $3, and we covered COVID since August 1st. So we stopped covering it mid-March, and August 1st, we started covering it. Yeah. That being said, on the health insurance has been covered the whole time, because that one doesn't have exclusions like that. I mean, with that one, you typically apply with your medical history, and then if it's approved, then you're covered for it. There are just a few exclusions, like with extreme.
Was that one available like before COVID, or was that something you guys launched post-COVID?
So we had only launched it for companies pre-COVID,
okay.
And we hadn't even made a platform or anything. So what we did was we just like immediately made it available, but like people had to give us all that. We didn't have like online forums or anything for that. We got that a few months later, just like iteratively added, so that the people that were kind of stuck somewhere and really needed coverage, we were able to sell them that insurance. Which is, it's a health insurance policy is more of a commitment, like it's a year-long contract and things like that. So, but it really was the right decision for some people.
How has COVID affected you guys? Not necessarily in terms of like the product, and obviously from now on, everybody's going to be paying attention to like the pandemic exclusions. At least like this next generation is always going to be like, hey, remember that one time. So, but in terms of like just as a company and maybe your direction, how has COVID affected you guys?
So for us, it's actually it's been going really well, I would say. So first of all, I think we had a really good response. Like, we were very responsive. A lot of, we're a very customer oriented company. Like, we focus on customer service. We have it available 24/7. When COVID hit, then so we were sending out like multiple emails to all our customers at once. And, I was in customer service. We had like tons of people on the team, because, it was just like so extreme every time we sent out very, serious information to thousands of people at once. And one thing was, sending people home, we covered so that people could fly home, the plane tickets, and that's kind of like, our customers were not the only ones in the world that were going home at that time. So it was like complete chaos with getting, planes, and a lot of changes that were made. So right when it was at its most intense, I think we handled it really well, and we're very communicative with anyone that had any, like, were scared or didn't know what was going on. Stressful, but we got through that well. And then we had a bit of a dip, because a lot of people did go home. But like, compared to the industry, so yeah, we lost about 30% of our customers, while the travel insurance industry as a whole lost about 90% or more than 90%.
Like all of them, 90%,
right? Yeah, because we have nomads. That's our customer base, right? So they're long term, and people choose to not go home. Then the health insurance went up, because people were suddenly more concerned. Oh wait, there's a pandemic going on. I need to have a health insurance, and this covers that. And another thing is that health insurance is really tailored for remote teams, and suddenly a lot of companies are going remote. Considering that, and then when we started covering COVID August 1st on the travel medical insurance, both of the products have just been doing really well, because there also aren't that many travel insurances that do cover it at this point still. So I think we handled well when it was at its worst, and the future is very bright.
What about in terms of goals? Like, has this experience in any way? And obviously, like one of the things that we've been talking a lot about, not just on this podcast, but I think the media and a lot of other people have been talking about as a result of this um, pandemic is that like there's going to be an increase in remote workers, and a percentage of those remote workers are likely going to become nomads, right? Like they're going to be
Mhm.
like, hey, this is pretty nice. Why don't I just
Yeah.
do it from Thailand instead of from my house? So has it in any way changed like your goals or what you're planning on launching in the next year or in the future?
No, very for us, it's very much the same. It's just like awesome that I mean, the pandemic's horrible, but remote work is a really good thing for the world. I think in terms of like
Mhm.
equal opportunity and having companies be more remote friendly and being more open to hiring people from anywhere in the world. And yeah, that's kind of like the future that we are building our company based on is remote work or location independence, digital nomadism, and so that hasn't changed. We were just like very, I'm just happy that we gotten as far as we had when this came, even faster and than we thought it would. But yeah, we like it was just accelerated by 10 years. Instead of being where we are
Right.
now in 10 years, we're there in 20. Instead of 2031 is 2021, and yeah. I'm very optimistic. Once we just get like widespread vaccination and everything, I'm very optimistic about the future.
So obviously you guys focus on, like you said, like you guys focus on nomads. Like you're very
Mhm,
specific. Like this is our products are for digital nomads.
mhm,
And do you think that there is room? Obviously, you guys are doing well, but do you think that there is room for like the digital nomad? If we're going to think of like the digital nomad as a category of buyer, do you think that it's a big enough of a pool of people to support more of these services? Because
mhm,
it's something that, for many years we've been saying like, hey, it would be really great if we had this service or we had this
mhm,
service or we had that
mhm.
service, but there was never really enough people to make it feasible. Do you
Yeah.
think the community is now large enough and sort of sustainable enough, I guess you can say, to support more of these services?
Um, I definitely think that the digital like we can almost like I think we're underestimating how large it is. But that being said, we're not only focusing on like digital nomads. It's more of a we also focus on remote teams that may or may not be living in their home country. And in future, it's more of a building on this world that's more borderless. Like me for now, I haven't like even though I'm gone like almost half the year, or I'm somewhere else half the year. I'm not, I rent a place, I have a car here, just got a car. Don't even have a driver's license yet, but
You can't
working on
live in
that.
LA
Yeah,
and not have a car. Come on.
exactly.
This is
Yeah, yeah. So I just moved here, just got a car, getting a license like this month, and yeah. So, but I still kind of think of myself like I would still prefer to work with like global solutions, so that
Mhm.
when I'm traveling and going places and then I'm free to move or go wherever. um yeah, and I feel like that's more so than necessarily having to move around all the time. It's just like about that sensation of being a global person. And
Mhm.
it's
Like a
kind of
global
cheesy.
citizen.
Yeah, global
Yeah.
citizen is like a little bit cheesy, but yeah, it's what we have for now. Digital nomad slash location independent slash just like being borderless. Yeah. So the segment is like bigger than just the people that define themselves as digital nomads, even though that's kind of the pioneers of this whole movement is digital nomads. But they've also, they're kind of paving the way and, dealing with like they're just choosing to live that way despite, or we are just choosing to live that way despite the that it's complicated. Like you just
Mhm.
accept that you have to move every 3 months and things like that.
Yeah, I had Esther Jacobs on the podcast. I don't know if you've heard of her before. She's Dutch and she is kind of like the poster child for like, hey, this is hard and no one is recognizing the fact of like how difficult it is to be a nomad because we all kind of
Mhm.
like go through the loopholes. But she had some notoriety in the Netherlands, and what happened with her is that she kind of like the Netherlands was like, hey, you can't be a citizen here anymore, and she was like, what do you mean I can't be a citizen here? So she has done a really good job. And if anybody's listening, if you want to check out that story, it's like the craziest story I've ever heard in my life. But so Yeah, I've been like really excited about, obviously we've been seeing countries popping up that are offering nomad visas, and Estonia led the way with that, but many more are doing it now. We're getting midterm rental platforms. So I'm really optimistic like yourself that I think even though the community has been big enough for a while, I think the rest of the world is all of a sudden now going like, oh, I think there's enough here for us to actually create a lot of these services. So I'm really looking forward to like what in 10 years, 5, 10 years, what we're going to have available. Um, I want to ask you about an interesting project that, funny enough, I was talking about this with some friends, and everybody was saying, like, Mitko, you tend to come up with crazy ideas. This is definitely the craziest. And I had a couple of these conversations with friends. And then I turn around and I read that you guys are launching a digital nomad country called Plumia. And it was crazy where I was like, sent it to my friends. I was like, see, I'm not insane. There's other people talking about this. So tell me about, where did this come from and like what's the goal? Because that is a very big undertaking. So where did the idea come from and why go in this direction?
I mean, yeah, I said that we started out building a global social safety net, but we've always talked about it as building a country on the internet. Like that's how we think
Mhm.
about it. I mean, we basically, I mean, it's strange that we're like working in the insurance industry, but what we're really doing is, we're trying to create a world where borders matter less, and in particular in terms
Mhm.
of like what you have access to of safety, like the most important things for you. Um, and yeah, it's like obvious that we need a passport that isn't like predetermined by the geographical
Where
location
you're
you were
born, yeah.
born, which
Mhm.
is a very strange situation. I mean, and it's just like I think that's starting to become pretty obvious for people, and that a citizenship shouldn't. I mean, I think country like citizenships based on borders will also exist, but a lot of countries are, more and more countries are opening up for dual citizenships, and that yeah, having a citizenship that's not predetermined by where you're born is a natural next step. And yeah, so Plumia is going to be the first country on the internet. I don't think it's going to be the only one. And the Safety Wing is part of the people taking the initiative to create this. And yeah, it's very exciting. It's we're early stage conversation still about the next steps, but we're creating a plan to get to a passport.
So what is going to be the difference between like what you guys are doing now versus like what is going to be like the first thing that maybe Plumia does? Like what are you guys doing in there at the moment that
Yeah.
people can get excited about, or if anybody wants to check out, like what exactly are you guys doing inside of Plumia at the moment?
Yeah, so Plumia is we're mainly funding it. It's we're still working on the exact whether it's going to be a company or a nonprofit, but it's not going to be, you know, under say it's not going to be a safety wing country, right? It's an initiative on its own to create the passport, the global passport, and it's more people are involved, and yeah, but we're happy to provide a social safety net and for this new country and contribute in any way we can with our connections and gathering people and yeah, everyone who's part of this is helping out with their connections and finding the right things to create the good next steps.
So are you hoping that this is going to be something where like one day somebody can like get off a flight and when they get to the border they're going to present their Plumia passport? Like what's like the end goal for this?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just it's very strange how the right now like what determines which countries you have access to is where you were born. Um, yeah, at Y Combinator, I met this guy who was from Kyrgyzstan, and he was working at Google in Ireland, and like he had to witness like all of his friends just like hopping around Europe and going on trips all the time, and he just couldn't because his visa was only valid in Ireland.
Mhm.
And and it's just like, so like why is his you know he was just as like nice of a guy, just as much of a or like just as much of a criminal as in terms of like not being a criminal at all
Right, right, right.
as like all his friends that he was working with. And it's just like an absurd situation. And we yeah, so yeah, that's citizenship is not something you're born with. It's something that you choose and you can earn. Yeah, just like I mean, in the States we have TSA pre-check, for example, or
Right.
global entry, those kinds of things. And Yeah.
Well, it's really an antiquated idea because it makes sense when your economic income, right, is tied to your direct geographic location, right? So when there were people like, for example, I'm Eastern European, I was born in Bulgaria. A lot of Bulgarians left Bulgaria at a point because there was no money, right? So they went to
Yeah.
places like Germany, France, Spain, because they could earn a lot more money there. And so
Hmm.
that made sense. But now this idea of your friend being stuck in Ireland, I guess the idea was because like, hey, this is where the passport was, but they don't want him going to other places and impacting, like that's where he was allowed to go because they thought if he went somewhere else, he would go elsewhere or try to escape elsewhere illegally because there'd be more economic benefit. Now with remote work, who cares, right? Like
Yeah.
you can be working for an American company and be living in, Turkestan or, wherever you want to be. So it just doesn't really make sense anymore. And as more and more people enter the remote workforce and this sort of, non physical labor workforce,
Hmm.
it really is. I do agree. It's an antiquated idea of these borders and you can go to this country because we don't
Hmm.
think you're going to escape, but to this one, you can't.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. And yeah, it's natural. I think, yeah, a lot of people our age agree that this
Mhm.
is just a natural progression, and it's kind of the old system is a legacy system, and anyway, SafetyWing can help with contribute to the future that is that where there are global citizenships or citizenships
Mhm.
that are not tied to where you're born. Yeah, we will.
So looking forward, you said that you guys have some new exciting things coming out in Q2, Q3, like I think
Hmm.
you said it was the item sort of insurance.
Yeah.
With it being the beginning of a new decade,
Hmm.
what is the thing that you're hoping that in 10 years, in 2031, when we look back, what are the things that Safety Wing, would have done in the next 10 years?
I mean, definitely contributed to making citizenships something that you choose. That is the number one thing, and equal opportunities. Building a comprehensive safety net, like where it's a membership. So I have health insurance and child medical insurance now, and then working on disability insurance and income protection and pension savings. And one thing, pensions is interesting because that's also something that I think will change a lot. Because there's a big difference between retiring in San Francisco and retiring in Thailand, right?
Right.
So instead of having necessarily like a target age, so right now it's like the existing pension systems assume that you will work and retire in the same place, or
Hmm.
get your paycheck, so that it's like it's balanced based on that paycheck. And then we have so in Norway, there's a certain chunk of your income, and then when you're 65 or 67 or whatever it is now, then you can get, what you save back plus some extra, or yeah. And but what if you work with a, New York level salary and you live in Thailand and you want to retire there?
Right.
You can probably retire at like 35.
Right. 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 Not
So you can,
65. Yeah.
yeah. So you can set that target then at the different age. So that's something that's interesting, and hopefully we can contribute to that, and also maybe making like pensions more of an interesting thing, because it's not, for me. I mean, obviously, I'm a founder and I'm like very dedicated to what I'm doing, but yeah, not needing to work, but you can choose whether people, if you retire at 35 or 40 or 45 or 50, you're just younger than 70, um, and even after 70 for those that do that. But you still have a lot of energy to do what you really want to do, whether that's like pursuing creative endeavors or starting a company, which might be, which is easier to do when you have money to fall back on. Yeah. So
Hmm.
that's definitely, pensions, and the way we live our lives, like our working years, or maybe people just will take sabbaticals every 3 years, 4 years. Yeah. And equal opportunity, just in general, contributing to equal opportunities, and remote work, making remote work more established, um, making internet globally available. And yeah.
Are you pumped about the whole Elon Musk global internet pursuit?
Yeah, absolutely. It's
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. I think that's gonna
yeah,
be like once that happens and you
yeah,
can just like actually, hang out in different places and be
yeah,
remote. I think that's going to be a
Mhm.
huge game changer.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I think like that thing that we're kind of, I grew up, I'm a millennial, I would call us, which we are the first generation to grow up with the internet. And now we have like the Gen Z that are the first generation to grow up with social media. Like that's something that came later in my life. And it was like fascinating to remember it when it came more so than, yeah, I mean, the internet's obviously developed, but I grew up with it being there. And I think the next one is just going to be, yeah, remote work. It's a complete revolution. It's just a complete
Mm-hmm.
change. And the world is just going to look completely different. The way it looked different 10 years ago when there was no social media, and it looked different 20 years ago or 30 years ago when there was no internet. And yeah, it's going to look completely different 10 years from now with everyone being part of remote work in some extent. Like obviously there would be local jobs, but then the people that are there might be working remotely. So
Yeah, for
mhm.
sure. Well, Sarah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that you came on, and I'm really excited for everything that you guys are doing over at Safety Wing. Like I said earlier, I'm really, really excited for Plumia and to see where that goes and everything else that you're doing. If anybody is listening and is interested to check out your products and is interested in the health insurance, where can they go to find out more about that?
Yeah, SafetyWing.com. So whenever we have our products, we also have some links to some other projects that we have there, like building remotely, where we have like a blog that's eventually going to become a book, and we have our own podcast about building and scaling a remote company.
Mhm.
Yeah, and also have some COVID resources and things, and you can read about them by our insurance on our website.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I look forward to hopefully meeting up sometime, not during COVID. That'd be great.